One.
All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And can you come back from the camera a little bit?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. All right, stand by. Let me check the audio. Yeah. Yeah, we're good. Stand by. There are no rules. Say whatever you want. We don't edit video. Only edit to cut it to put in graphics. Will be your lower third, but nothing's off limits. So go wherever you want to go. It'll get tough. It'll get fiery. I don't cut. I don't edit. And I save the raw video in case anybody tries to cut or edit.
Great.
All right. So
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Hey man, listen, we may disagree, but I don't. Quite candidly, I don't fuck around. I let people say what they need to say.
Okay.
I don't play that game.
Great. I appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to lead right in because I already did an intro, so we're going to go right in. Many conservatives, including myself, were very, very happy. Hell, I was ecstatic when I thought we had a viable challenger in Wisconsin for Rhino, Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan, a disappointment who seemed to have been more of a Democrat than a Republican. This guy comes out of nowhere, Paul Nehlen. He challenges Ryan. Now, it didn't surprise anybody that he didn't beat Ryan. Ryan was the sitting Speaker of the House. He was able to raise a ton of money. He had probably $1 billion in earned media, having done nothing but been a politician. We were excited about a guy like Nehlen. Hell, I got to know Nehlen. I had him on my radio show. We had spoken on the cell phone. We had texted. I was a supporter until he started tweeting what I deemed to be grossly anti-Semitic content. Now, I'm not a politically correct guy. I'm not a guy that believes hate crimes should have a different standard than a regular crime. A felony's a felony. But some of the things Nehlen did made him, to me, a political pariah and made his message something that I wanted nothing to do with. And we'd argued on Twitter. We'd gone back and forth. And initially, I didn't want to have Paul on the show. But you know what? Paul was right about one thing. Free speech is the bedrock of America. So yesterday, I invited Paul Nehlen on. He accepted. Paul's here now. Paul, thanks for accepting the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, John. As I've said, I go on every show I'm invited on if I can possibly manage it.
Okay, well, look, you're here, so let's get right into it. Let's talk about what
Sure.
everybody wants to know. Are you anti-Semitic?
No, I'm not anti-Semitic. I feel that the media has put two positions out there. Anti-Semitic or philo-Semitic. You either love or you hate. And I believe that's wrong. I believe there's a middle ground where you can say, look, I'm indifferent. I'm America first. I don't have to love or hate anything else.
Let me stop you there.
Sure,
We've got a lot
sure.
to cover. I'm not going to limit your time. We have no time limit here, so let's go through each point because I want the audience. And I'm not cutting you off. I want the audience I want to break this down. I want to really dilute this and get in the weeds a little bit.
Sure.
This was all kicked off by a Twitter thread you posted. And one of the tweets was tweet number 7, said, which is to say, and you put up a Photoshop version of a Wheel of Fortune board, and it clearly was saying the Goyim no, which was a reference to non-Jews knowing about what many of us interpreted to be some vast Jewish conspiracy against America. Now, I've said this to you publicly, I'll say it again. I find nothing about your position in line with the America First agenda. The America that I love, the America in which I'm a conservative, that I defend, doesn't classify people by race or religion.
Well, let me respond to that, John, in full. First of all, that was not where it started. Where it started was I tweeted out that I had just completed my 18th public town hall here in Wisconsin. And a gentleman by the name of Ari Cohn, who happens to be Jewish, tweeted back at me. I've not been tweeted at by Ari Cohn. He tweeted back at me and said, but only for white people and none of the Jews either, right? So I didn't know what that had to do with anything. So Ari Cohn and I went back and forth a little bit, and Ari Cohn first suggested that he was a white guy, which I had no problem with. And then he suggested he wasn't a white guy, he was a Jewish guy. And so that really... No, John, you gotta let me talk.
Well,
You
hold
got to
on.
let me talk.
I said you're going to have your time, so take your temper down a notch.
Okay.
Because you don't
John,
do the temper thing with me. Doesn't intimidate me like it does some of the morons on Twitter.
I'm not intimidating you, John. I just want to have my time. You said you're not going to interrupt me, but you are.
You're going to have your time, but it's my show, and I'm going to ask the questions. What is the difference between a Jewish person and a white person? A German Christian and a German Jew? A Polish Christian and a Polish Jew? A Russian Christian and a Russian Jew? A British Christian and a British Jew? What is the difference?
Well, John, as I was saying, I would think there's no difference, but I'll tell you what I noticed. I noticed as I went back through my verified Twitter feed, the vast majority of the folks who were attacking me had this weird coincidence. And so when you say to me that I'm not America First, John, and we both agree that there's got to be a wall built.
Answer the question.
I did answer the question. I said that there shouldn't be any, John, I said that there shouldn't be any difference.
But is there,
right?
But to you, is there a difference?
The sense a larger percentage of people who are attacking me happen to be Jewish, there may be a difference.
Okay, in what way? This is very important.
It is very important, John.
How is a Jewish, a Polish Jew, non-white, but a Polish Christian is white, in your opinion? Explain that distinction to me.
John, I can't explain the distinction. All I can tell you is mathematically, John, if you're going to ask me a question, you got to let me answer it, right?
Let me read your tweet to Eric Cohn, and then I'm going to let you go with your question. You wrote to Eric Cohn on December 18th, 2017. You tweeted to him, just admit you are a bigot, and you put 3 parentheses around each side of bigot, which is indicative of that you're talking to a Jewish person.
Right.
Just admit you are, let me finish, just admit you are a bigot, Eric Cohn, and I'll pretend you didn't pretend you were white for the purposes of starting a race war with me. So, you claim that being Jewish means you're not white, and in the same breath you're saying that Judaism is a race, not a religion. Let's not go anywhere else. We have a lot of time to discuss everything else. Explain to me how someone who is a Polish Jew is non-white, but a Polish Christian is white, and explain how a Jewish man would be, a white Jewish man, by the looks of Eric Cohn, would be starting a race war with you. We need to establish that because that's really the crux of everything else that has sprung out of this. So please focus on that.
Sure.
Explain that to me.
You're going to let me answer, right?
Go for it.
Do I need to send you articles showing that they've proven that Jewish is a race in addition to being a religion? Do you reject that Jewish is a race in addition to being a religion?
I reject that if somebody's DNA is Polish, it shows that they're...
You don't have Polish DNA. You don't have Polish DNA.
Primarily from Eastern Europe.
You don't have Polish DNA. There is no Polish DNA.
Eastern European DNA.
Northern European DNA is different than Ashkenazi or Sephardic Jew.
Well, that's not what I'm asking you, though, Paul. So you're going on another tangent.
I'm not. I'm answering you directly.
Well, you're not. If someone has the identical DNA, Eastern European DNA, let's say Northern European DNA, let's say their DNA indicates they come from Ireland, England, Scotland, and their family converted to Judaism in 1432, as did the Christian family with the same DNA, is the Jewish family white, in your opinion?
No.
Why? If the DNA is identical, why are they?
Well, let me ask you. I'm going to answer your question. Did Rachel Dolezal change her DNA when she suggested she was black?
Hold on.
Did Rachel Dolezal change her DNA? Answer the question, John. I'm happy to answer yours, but you don't want to answer mine.
No, but so you're saying that white is an ideology. It's not.
No, I'm not.
Well, you just did, because Rachel Dolezal is white.
Rachel Dolezal is white, and she portrayed herself as black, but she was never black. Black DNA is different than white DNA. So there's a different race there. She suggested she was a different race, and she's not, right?
It's not analogous.
It is absolutely analogous.
Or it's not. It's a ridiculous analogy. Rachel Dolezal was a fraud. A white person who is Jewish and a white person who is Christian. That is non-analogous to Rachel Dolezal. That's quite frankly a dumb analogy.
John, it's not dumb. I mean, let's not call each other dumb here, right? I've got 12 U.S. patents and I've run Fortune 500 businesses. I'm not dumb, and I know you're not dumb either.
The analogy, though, is silly, Paul. Look,
It's not a silly analogy, but I'll tell you this, John.
hold on, focus on the point because the audience wants to know. You're saying that two people who are ethnically from the same region of the world, whose DNA bears out the exact same markers, would be different. One would be considered non-white solely because of their religion. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying because of their religion. I'm saying because of their DNA. I'm saying if a white family converted to Judaism in the 1400s and their offspring continue to be Jewish until this day, and you tested their DNA, they would test out as white. But at the same time, their next door neighbor was ethnically Jewish. Now, let me finish, John, because I'm going right to the heart of this, but you don't like the answer. If their next door neighbor who was ethnically Jewish with Jewish DNA, their same family produced, they would test out ethnically Jewish. And the whole thing of this, John, the whole sad truth of this, John, you're making this about Jewish and non-Jewish. I'm not.
You're the one in your tweet to Eric Cohn who said, I'll pretend you didn't pretend you were white for the purposes of starting a race war. You just said, this is recorded, this is memorialized, that two white families in England with these same DNA markers as we sit here in 2018, one would not be white because their religion is Judaism, one would be white because their religion is Christianity. Paul, those were your words. They're recorded here. They're memorialized. So explain to me how, despite them having identical DNA markers, one family would be white and one family would not be. It's a simple question. Don't talk about the next door neighbors. Don't talk about the next door neighbors. Focus
John,
on those two.
Because you're starting out from the wrong place. That's why, John.
Ask you a question, Paul.
I'm answering it. You're starting out from the wrong place, John. You're starting out from saying their DNA is identical. And if their DNA was identical, they wouldn't one be a Jew and the other be white. That wouldn't be the case. So you're starting out from a fallacy. You are, not me.
How am I starting out from a fallacy?
Because they're not. DNA would never be the same. If one was Jewish and one was white, they're not starting out from the same point.
Hold on a second. So if you tomorrow converted to Judaism, you're telling me your DNA would change?
No, I'm not.
Well, that's the argument you just made.
No, it's not the argument that I just made. I'm saying.
Paul, I said to you very clearly. Again, maybe it's not conveying through the mic. Two families, as we sit here on February 2nd, 2018, living in London, England, both of whom share identical ethnicity DNA markers. Identical. Take the what-ifs, take the next-door neighbors, throw them out. They don't exist. For our purposes, there are two families that exist in the entire UK, in the city of London. Identical DNA markers, both showing that they are ethnically from that region, from the exact same places. Is the Jewish family white?
If their DNA markers say they are from Britain,
right,
then they're white. If their ethnic DNA markers say they're Jewish, they're Jewish. That's my point.
So my point is, you're saying that you're contradicting yourself now.
I'm not. I'm being very crystal clear here, John.
Okay.
And we're
is a Russian Jew white?
Sorry?
Is a Russian Jew white?
Not if they have Jewish markers, no.
Is a convert to Judaism white if they converted in 2017, but their ethnicity is from England, Ireland, and Norway? Are they still white?
If their ethnicity is Jewish, they're Jewish. Of race. Doesn't matter what their religion is. Let's set the religion part apart.
You didn't answer my question. I just said to you, if their ethnicity, if their DNA markers show that they're from England, Ireland, and Norway, and then they converted to Judaism in 2017, are they white?
Yes.
Okay, so you did, and we'll play this back, and you'll have this full video.
Yeah.
And you go back to your tweets. You are contradicting what you initially said.
I'm not contradicting. Okay, so I'm saying you have never acknowledged. Go ahead, John. You finish and let me talk then.
I'm going to let you explain now why Jews are non-white. Go for it.
Because they can do genetic testing now that shows whether somebody's got Jewish blood or they don't have Jewish blood. And for a long time, that was verboten. That was the unspeakable is, but they checked bloodlines. And now Israel is checking to see if people have that blood in order to determine whether they're Jewish or not. They're doing. I'm not doing that. It's not my conjuring. I've read this in Haaretz and the Times of Israel. So, and the bottom line here, John, is you and I agree on 95% of the things, but where you and I are disagreeing right now is maybe 5%. And so you're telling me that we can't set aside 5% of our differences, and you want to take the position of you're the MAGA guy? I'm fighting for America first, and you're arguing with me about Israel and about Judaism. Let me finish.
But you're not going to the question. I haven't even brought up Israel. So let's talk about what is the problem. If someone has DNA that indicates they're Jewish, what would be the problem with that? What would be the problem with that?
I didn't say there was a problem with it. I have never said there's a problem with having Jewish DNA, John.
Let me read you some of your own tweets.
Sure.
Let me read you some of your own tweets. Okay. Here we go. You tweeted on well, you have this rant where first of all, let's go to the list. You made a list of people. I was number one on the list, by the way. I was number one on the list. And next to my name in big bold black letters, it said non-Jewish. Kurt Schlichter was number 2, non-Jewish. Then you're listed about 80 some odd people. You made a list of people as Jewish and non-Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't find anything wrong with someone being Jewish or someone not finding this vast Jewish conspiracy, why put those people on a list?
Because when you look at that, if you've got a mind like an engineer, you think in mathematics. And so for 2% of the population, some subpopulation of that 2% is overrepresented in the people attacking me. And in fact, they're overrepresented in the people attacking Trump's wall and Trump's policies. So if you have a MAGA...
Hispanics, Democrats of all colors, races, creeds are attacking Trump's wall. And I think those people are anti-American. They're attacking the wall. It is a factually and statistically incorrect statement to say.
It's not incorrect. It's not incorrect.
Oh, it is.
They are.
Factually. There aren't enough of them in the United States. There aren't enough Jews in the United States to outnumber the Hispanics that are criticizing Trump's wall. That's a factually incorrect statement.
It's not factually incorrect, John.
It's mathematically impossible, so it's factually incorrect.
No,
I mean, that's not something
John,
to argue on.
check Hias and see how they feel about this. They're a huge organization that has a lot of political sway in this country. And secondly, I would say to you, when I fight for America first, I don't care about other countries. I don't think about other countries.
I'm not talking about other countries. Let's stick to the facts. I'm a
fact-driven
guy. I come out of law enforcement. I use crime stats. It is a mathematical impossibility. A mathematical impossibility for Jews in America to outnumber other groups of liberals to oppose Trump's wall. Your assertion is more Jews than any other group oppose Trump's wall.
Not just the wall. Not just the wall. I mean, look,
that's a mathematical impossibility.
Jews are overrepresented in Hollywood. They have a huge stranglehold on the culture, and they're overrepresented in the media. Clearly overrepresented.
But again, Paul,
so I'm not deflecting, John. I'm going right to the heart of this. I'm saying Jews are overrepresented in media and culture in Hollywood, and they are conspiring to work against Trump.
We didn't get there yet. We were talking about the wall. You made a factual statement. You're a congressional candidate.
That's right.
You looked into the camera.
That's right.
You said that Jews more than any other group oppose Trump's wall. I posit to you that according to United States Census data, that is a mathematical impossibility. According to federal election data, U.S. Census data, and the extrapolated anecdotal data, that's a mathematical impossibility. Would you concede that your statement is hyperbole and exaggeration? Because you say you're an engineer. Is that statement not a mathematical impossibility?
Let me refer you. No, and here's why. Okay. Are you familiar with weighted averages, John?
Paul.
Yes or no? Yes or no? You're either.
Sure I am, Paul.
You are. Okay, so do you think the weight of somebody who's in Hollywood is more than Say one person in Hollywood carries more weight than 1,000 illegal aliens in this country.
You're going on another
No, I'm not. I'm going right to the heart of it, John. You don't like the answer because it conflicts with your point.
Like people who change goalposts in debates.
I'm not changing the goalposts, John.
Let's address it.
I'm not, John. If you're as smart as you say you are, and you know what, I have no doubt, I have no reason to believe that you aren't, you will acknowledge that one person in Hollywood, like Susan Sarandon, can have a huge effect as opposed to 10,000 illegal aliens in the country. She will have a huge effect. Somebody like Jake Tapper will have a huge effect where 10,000 illegal aliens will not have that same effect, John. So there is my point, John.
But I'll counter that by saying Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, two non-Jews, but Obama's arguably Muslim sympathetic, have far greater influence than Susan Sarandon or Jake Tapper. They oppose the wall.
Well,
Nancy Pelosi has far greater influence. So if you want to get into weighted averages, your argument's debunked again.
It's not debunked again, John.
Well,
it's not debunked again. It is not.
65 million Americans didn't vote for Susan Sarandon. They voted for Hillary. The proof is in the numbers.
Okay.
You're an engineer. You want to talk science.
Okay. You know what, John?
The numbers don't bear out your argument, Paul.
I'll tell you what, that 2% is magnified substantially by the control in media and the control of Hollywood. So that was the point that I was getting at. Do you want me to concede that the coverage is across the spectrum, but it's only a micrometer deep? Okay, I would probably agree with that. You know, are there 65 million Americans opposed to a wall? I don't think there actually are. I don't think there are. I think there's a lot of people who voted for Hillary that would still want a wall.
Well, maybe there are, but I think you need to concede that your claim is actually wrong, even when you weight it, because Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama have far more influence with liberals.
I don't think so.
Well, you don't think that Hillary Clinton has more influence with left-leaning Democratic voters than Susan Sarandon, Paul? Come on. I mean,
John, I'm not. We're not just saying Susan Sarandon. I'm saying Hillary Clinton. So we'd have Susan Sarandon and all of her counterparts in Hollywood. I mean,
when was the last time Susan Sarandon made a movie? I don't. Nobody under the age of 57.
John, the only reason I picked that name up is because I saw her recently in the news bad-mouthing Trump. You know, all right, let's put Chelsea Handler. I mean, let's throw any number of.
Let's move on to Israel, because you brought up Israel. I want to move on there.
Sure.
Do you support President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and to move the embassy there?
Sure. I tweeted that. You saw my tweet on it, right?
I didn't. So
you saw my other tweets, but you didn't see that one. Yeah. Yes, I did.
Well, I have 2 million impressions a day. I don't get to see every tweet out there.
You're very important, John. I can't deny you're very important.
Okay, listen, I'm not saying I'm important. I'm just saying there's only so much a person can absorb. If you send me that tweet, I'd be happy to acknowledge you tweeted that. All right, let's talk about your legislation. You proposed. I want to switch gears now from Judaism and race and religion. I want to go into this legislation that you proposed. I have a copy of it here on my screen.
That's great.
Okay, let's talk about this, because I've worked on legislation in 15 states and at the federal government, and I will concede that platforms like Twitter, platforms like Facebook are left-leaning. However, they're private businesses, and there are some things in this legislation that, while you purport to be a hardcore constitutionalist, which I would have to disagree with because of your positions on certain things, but let's debate this. I find this to be some of the most statist, Democrat-leaning legislation I've seen. Let me explain why. And this is up there. People can go to @Nehlen on Twitter. It's on your timeline. All I did was take a screenshot of what's on your timeline. This is not edited in any way. I took 2 images, put them into a PDF to make it easier and more efficient to use on air.
Great.
So you describe censorship as denial of platform access and normal use thereof, e.g. lockout, suspensions, bans. Point 2, shadow banning. Point 3, issuance of verified status based on any factors unrelated to identity authentication, throttling accounts and/or content without disclosure, embargoing content, i.e. no memory holding content without the consent of the creator, You call censorship manipulating trending algorithms without disclosure, and demonetization. Those are the points you outlined. Did I miss any of them?
No, you got it.
Okay. My problem here, Paul, is that you want government to step in and do the job of the free market.
You're leaving that to me. So the answer to that is this isn't some newfangled idea here, John. I'm asking for one federal statute that ports people's First Amendment free speech onto the de facto public town square. It's not unreasonable to suggest that I want smaller government, but I also want my free speech. And so suggesting that the government, I'm not suggesting that Twitter wouldn't have their free speech or Facebook or YouTube wouldn't have their free speech, but there's two things that these three companies in particular, because they are so mega monolithic, enjoy. That is the Communication Decency Act of 1996. They can't be prosecuted for a whole lot of things that go on in their businesses, where pharmaceutical companies or automotive companies, basically any sector of our American economy, they would be subject to problems. Well, let me finish.
Hold on, there's a lot of info here, though. I'm going to let you go on this. I'm very interested, but let's break that down for the audience, because you went into two different points and it'll get confusing. So you want to regulate certain policies in which they engage. So let's separate that from the free speech argument. And then you're comparing the damage they're able to do to industries, heavily regulated industries like the auto industry and the pharma industry. Is that a fair assessment of what you said? So we're going to go through the whole thing, but I just want to make this simpler for the audience. Is that a fair assessment of the point you just made?
Fair assessment.
Okay. So let's go back to point one. How is infringing upon their property rights, their rights as business owners, infringing upon their free speech? Let's forget it's Twitter. If I own a chain of restaurants, and my policy is you can't wear flip-flops in the restaurant, or my policy is we're a private business. We want to cater to all clientele. We don't want you we don't want you talking politics at the bar. Or our bar is named Barack and Hillary's, and we only want Democrats in our bar. I'm allowed to do that, Paul. And the free market either keeps me in business or puts me out of business. As a conservative, I would vehemently oppose legislation that would shut down Barack and Hillary's bar. But it seems to me that's what you're advocating here.
Well, here's what I'm advocating, John. I'm advocating for my free speech and your free speech and liberals' free speech, everybody's free speech.
Well, hold on. I'm not cutting you off. How is free speech, though? The First Amendment does not extend to a private business.
It does if Congress says it does. It does if Congress says it does.
So you want Congress now to regulate free speech, and you want Congress to allow businesses and private entities, or rather take away the rights of businesses and private entities to police themselves. You want a nanny state where the government is now going to come in and tell you what you're allowed to do in your business. For example, not baking a cake for a gay wedding. You're in favor of that because that's what you're proposing here.
We're already being told you've got to bake that cake. So are you
taking it a step further, and you want it as not? You don't want it only as judicial activism. You want it as legislation set in stone.
John, what I want is not to have to bake that cake, but what I want is to be able to advocate on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube to not bake that cake. But the leftists
here with this legislation, Paul. I've worked on a lot of legislation, and maybe the people you consulted on this didn't give you good advice. What you're saying?
Are you a constitutional attorney, John? Because that's who I'm working with on this.
Okay, well then I have to tell you, if I want to get your retainer back, let me read you this. You want to impose company fines of $500,000 per instance of wrongful censorship.
That's right.
If a company issues verified status based on any factor unrelated to identity authentication. So what you're then saying is that a restaurant could be fined $500,000 if they give preferred customer status to one person over another for a reason that the authorities in power at that moment deem unacceptable. You want a piece of legislation that would allow the Democrats, when the ebb and flow of politics puts them back into power, to use this as a weapon to oppress conservatives, because that's what they would do at this point.
John, the hypocrisy of your argument is staggering because you went from, I am specifically saying Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and you went to restaurants. And when we were having the discussion,
It's going to be
John,
law. The precedent will extend to every business.
John,
You can't have legislation that specifically names Facebook and Twitter. If you have a constitutional attorney advising you on this, Paul, they're giving you bad advice.
John,
You can't name two companies in legislation.
you can name major social media companies, social media, not restaurants. You know, when you have legislation that affects pharmaceutical companies, you don't name the pharmaceutical companies, but it doesn't apply to automotive companies. Do cafe standards apply to Maybelline? No, of course they don't, because they're in two different sectors, John. They're in two different sectors, and you were wrong to suggest that.
You're talking about any forum in which people can, I'll tell you right now, no legislative attorney on the planet would ever send this to committee. So what they would do is then they would carve out an exception. And I don't even know how many pieces of legislation I've worked on in my life. They would carve out the language specifying the companies, and they would put any public forum, any private business where a public forum could be hosted. So VFW halls, catering halls. This would be some of the most draconian anti-business and anti-property rights legislation in history. Was that thought through? That's all I'm asking you.
I think you're entirely incorrect, John. I think you're entirely incorrect, and you're looking for a way to have some problem with this, which is just absurd to me because you ought to be on the side of protecting conservatives. Who else is stepping up to do this? John, who else is stepping up to do this?
All right, let's
no one.
Let's use your Facebook and Twitter example. I'm a free market guy. I don't want legislation. I'll leave Twitter and go to another platform. Why would a conservative want the government to impose draconian fines on any business to affect shareholder value, to affect the markets, and to infringe even more on our liberties by allowing government to step into business decisions? There is nothing in the Constitution that says a private business can't have political biases. In fact, I think many conservatives would argue this would be an infringement of the rights of Twitter and Facebook.
They would retain. In fact, I specifically wrote that in there. They would still retain their free speech. Nobody suggests, John, when you post to Facebook that it's Facebook speech, or when you tweet something out that it was Twitter's words that were tweeted out, that Twitter owns those words.
Well, Twitter owns the content tweet. It's in the terms and conditions.
John, let's get to the nobody suggests that the people at Twitter were the ones who put the thoughts together that resulted in the letters being formed into words and phrases and sentences that made that thought in that tweet. As Twitter's.
I agree with you, Paul.
Okay,
when you
great.
When you read Twitter's terms and conditions and you establish your account, you agree to the censorship. They give you that disclaimer.
And I want to put a law in place. I want to put a law in place that says that if you're tweeting or Facebooking or YouTubing lawful content, as I've described it in this legislation, that your free speech will be protected, and those companies can't go in and change them.
But Paul, so what you're saying is you want to take away the rights of private businesses to set their own terms, conditions, and policies. You want government to set it for them. There's no way around that. That's exactly what you're saying. So
in the case of, I would gladly trade some infringement of 3 companies for 350 Americans. Call it 350 Americans.
So you, and I'm glad you said this on the show. So basically, you're saying that Ben Franklin was wrong, to paraphrase him, when he said those who'll trade essential liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Because you just directly contradicted one of the founding fathers.
No, I'm not. I'm arguing. No, John, I'm not.
You most certainly did. It's memorialized.
John,
you're willing to give up businesses. You're willing to have businesses give up essential liberties to protect one political ideology. Those were your words. You just said it, Paul. It's recorded.
Yeah, I would absolutely give up 3 for $350 million. And so I overwhelmingly give more free speech. I overwhelmingly give more free speech to Americans.
But that's not free speech, Nothing is preventing those Americans from going to New York, standing in the middle of Central Park and saying the same thing.
John, this is the most absurd position that you are taking. My assertion that the First Amendment applies to more people. You're suggesting that I am going against the founding fathers.
Not in a private venue.
The founding fathers fought to have free speech in all venues.
In the public square, not in the alehouse, not in the pub, not in their homes, not in their print shops.
But the difference is Twitter is now the de facto public square. That is where you find all the politicians.
But it's not.
It is.
It's a private club.
No.
Oh, it is. It is a private club. You set up an account.
John, people are going to listen to this and they are going to think you are a nut job. I hate to say this to you, but you ought to rethink your position on this. Because
I would never rethink my position on government intrusion into the policies of private businesses. I think Twitter's management is reprehensible. Jack Dorsey poses with D. Ray McKeeson from Black Lives Matter at riots where they talk about killing police officers.
Mm-hmm.
As a former cop, it turns my stomach. It's criminal. But I still don't want government stepping into a private business. Regulating that business and telling that business they can have their own terms, conditions, and policies.
This is not a newfangled idea. It's not a newfangled idea. I mean, I've got 2 oxygen sensors on my Ford F-150 because of CAFE standards. Do you think Ford wanted to put 2 on there? Probably not.
A vehicle is a privilege to drive a vehicle.
John, it's no different. The government made laws that private businesses have to follow. You have to wear a hard hat on a construction site. These are not newfangled ideas, John. That's why we hire these people as legislators, to make good laws that make us freer.
Hold on. There are already laws against the things that some of the things you consider problems, and you list those laws out. You say lawful speech is based upon the standards enshrined in the U.S. Constitution.
That's right.
With the following limitations. No child porn. 100% agree with that. I tracked those savages for years. No explicit, credible threats of physical violence. Most states now have statutes, felony statutes, against those threats. Those laws exist. No publishing any individual's non-public address, telephone number, or email address without consent. There are laws against doxing. Platforms may choose to prohibit otherwise lawful pornographic video. Those policies are in place. Restrictions on copyrighted content are already illegal. All of those things are illegal. Those comport with the oxygen sensors. Those are the things that affect public safety. You're talking about telling a company what policies, what terms, what conditions it can set on its own property inside of its private venue. No, the founding fathers would not agree with that. Absolutely not.
Because the venue is not a restaurant, it's not a pub, it's the public square. So being able to use lawful speech in the public square extends into Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. That's why I make that argument.
How is it public square? If I go to the local park that's owned by the city where I live, I don't have to enter my name and email address, get a confirmation email, then accept the terms and conditions of the park to walk into the park and start speaking. I'm sorry, your argument is debunked on its face.
It's not debunked on its face, John. It is. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, John. You go to the local public park and you start shouting out all your tweets and tell me how many responses you get.
Well, I went to the park in the middle of
how many people? I don't care if you go to Central Park, John. Your speech in that park does not carry like it does in Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.
Now you're split. Now you're talking about the reach. That has nothing to do with anything.
It does. It absolutely does. It absolutely does. It goes right. It cuts right to the heart of it, John. And
you sound like a socialist because one company is more successful because Twitter is more successful than, for example, Gab. Twitter should be regulated where Gab isn't. You sound like Obama. Let's distribute the wealth.
No, you're absolutely incorrect, John. So I'm going to take you through another mathematical concept. It's called network effects. So network effects means as you get more people, you can box out others. So for instance, Facebook and MySpace were head to head. And then once Facebook got over a certain threshold, they completely destroyed MySpace's utility. The utility of MySpace is
Paul, let me tell you something you don't know about that. News Corp was my client for 6 years. I was the CEO of the company running all of anti-sex predator interdiction efforts for MySpace, I reported to the two C-level employees running MySpace. It had nothing to do with Facebook. It had to do with MySpace's demise, had to do with a poor user interface, a lack of innovation, a lack of research and development. I was at their offices, Paul.
John,
I was there. Well, hold on.
I'm not arguing with that. I bet you're right. I bet you're right. I'll concede that you're right there.
It's their inability to compete, despite their parent company being News Corp and Facebook essentially being a startup. MySpace's poor business practices, poor research and development put them out of business. It had nothing to do with Facebook. The question is not that Facebook got, or the issue is not that Facebook got bigger. It's why did Facebook get bigger? And it's because MySpace failed to meet the free market demand. You just proved my point.
No, I didn't prove your point. Because I agreed with you up to the point that they faltered. But once Facebook got so big, network effects takes over, where it becomes so impossible for a competitor to scale the walls. Facebook will have the #1 position at least for the next decade. At least for the next decade. Same with Twitter. Same with YouTube.
Should they share the wealth and give their users to MySpace to revive it?
No, they should just have to. They should have to respect free speech rights.
So you want to cut them at their knees because they were too successful?
No. I don't want to break Facebook up. I think they've got a great business model. Twitter don't want to go into this. People say we should treat them as utility and break them up. I don't want 10 rogue Twitters all out there damaging our free speech. People like the platform.
As a conservative, I'm not afraid of it.
You're not going to see.
I don't want government regulating business at all. Our economy is booming because of deregulation. You're proposing regulation. I'll give you the last word, 30 seconds, then we're going to move on to another topic.
Great. John, I'd like all your listeners and followers to have a quick view of electnehlen.com because I go into more on this topic at my website. And
hold on, I'm not done with the interview. I want to talk to you about something else. I just want you to give me a last point on the Facebook issue.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I firmly believe that if we have to bake the cake, we should be able to get our free speech. I think it's a reasonable position to take.
All right. Now, I've got to move on to somebody who it seems that you admire, who it seems that you are an ally of, and that's David Duke, a former senior...
Dr. Duke. Dr. Duke.
Well, that's dubious. He had an honorary
Dr. Duke. Dr. Duke.
So you respect David Duke?
Dr. Duke.
Okay, you can call him Dr. Duke. I'm not going to call a Klansman Dr. Duke. You respect him. Do you respect David Duke?
John,
well,
I think it's reasonable to suggest you call him Dr. Duke because he's earned that credibility.
And as an American with free speech rights that you just advocated for, I choose not to call him Dr. Duke. So I'm going to call him David Duke.
He's been elected to office many times. He's done.
Well, it's very simple. Do you respect David Duke?
Yeah, I respect his positions on the border, on the wall, on all sorts of things. I mean, David Duke thinks we ought to have a wall. You think we ought to have a wall. So you don't have respect for that?
I have respect for a wall, not for David Duke. Let me read you something from David Duke on January 26, 2018, just last week. The same psychopaths, tribe, meaning the Jews, who successfully turned the world against the German people, that's a clear Holocaust denial, are the same maniacs turning the world against the oblivious, unknowing, brainwashed American people. We, period, no period, who's period responsible. So he's denying the Holocaust, saying that it was a Jewish conspiracy against the German people. That's clearly what he's saying. Anybody with an 8th grade education could see that. Do you agree with David Duke on that?
I don't have a position on it. I don't have a position on it because I haven't researched it enough to know. I haven't.
So wait a second. Are you saying you're not? Did the Holocaust happen, Paul?
I think a lot of people died in World War II, and I think
genocide during World War II at the hands of the Nazi Third Reich.
I think a lot of people died in that time. Yeah. So
Jewish genocide at the hands of the Nazi Third Reich during the 1930s into the 1940s. A very simple question. Did the Holocaust, as we commonly know and understand it, happen? Did the Nazis exterminate Jews and other people? but Jews to a much greater degree. Did that happen?
I think a lot of people died, yeah, at the hands of Nazis, and I think 20 million people died at the hands of Bolshevik Russian Jews. So we could look at Holodomor, we could look at the Russian Bolsheviks, we could look at Nazism, we could look at Maoism. I mean, I'm not familiar with all of these things. I'm not
familiar with the Holocaust?
In specific detail, John. I've seen different stories, different information. So I don't spend my time focusing on that, John. I've run businesses around the globe. I don't spend my time focusing on that.
Simple yes or no. In your opinion, did the Nazi Third Reich target Jews for extermination from the 1930s to the 1940s? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
David Duke doesn't seem to feel that way, so let's keep going. Masters of Deception in talking about the Jews from David Duke. Hitler, believe it or not, admired the Indians' warrior culture. He goes on to say he was appalled with the treatment they received under the federal government. The National Socialists, the Nazis, even declared the Sioux to be honorary Aryans. Now, anyone who studied history knows that was Hitler propaganda. He was just jabbing the U.S. any way he could. Do you believe David Duke was right about that? Do you believe that Hitler was this benevolent man who recognized that the American Indian was treated harshly by the U.S. government, and that this wasn't Nazi propaganda to jab the U.S. in any way possible?
You know what? I'd have to read that in greater detail. I'm sure there's more to that story. And in fact, I just read an article the other day about an Indian, I think it was in 1890, who claimed he had Aryan descent and he wanted to come into the United States. And they rejected his citizenship based on the fact that he wasn't a white person. And at that time, you could only come in if you were a white person into this country. I might have the dates wrong, but I read a little bit of that. So there's a lot of this that I don't know, John.
There's no doubt that the Native Americans were treated unfairly, but yeah. I'm talking about Hitler's propaganda against the U.S. that David Duke is repurposing 70 years later, 80 years later. Do you subscribe to David Duke's views on that?
I don't understand it in full context, John, and you're hitting me with something that I clearly am saying to you I don't know.
Okay, so let me ask you another question. Let's go in a different direction. Do you respect the rule of law?
Absolutely, I respect the rule of law.
Do you respect law enforcement, first responders?
Absolutely.
Okay. If any American were stolen from, how would you feel about that?
I would feel like they should have justice.
What would you feel about the person who stole from them?
That they needed to have justice placed upon them.
Would you respect that thief? Would you admire that thief?
Where are you headed with this, John?
Would you respect or admire a thief? That's all I'm asking you, Paul. It's a simple question.
You know, I guess if they were stealing food for their dying mother, I would have one answer for you. I would have to know the specifics of it to get to the bottom of it.
Specific. What if the person defrauded people who looked up to them for gambling, to gamble? Would you respect that? If this person had people that admired them and they stole money from those people to gamble, would you respect that?
It doesn't sound like that is a respectful thing to do.
Okay, but would you respect, if that person was convicted of stealing money from people who admired them and used it on gambling, would you respect that person?
I have no idea, John. I mean, if somebody
defrauded someone you knew, and it turned out that person was convicted for defrauding your friend, and then they used the money they stole to gamble, would you respect the person who defrauded your friend? It's a pretty simple question.
It's not a pretty simple question, John, and I'll tell you why it's not a simple question. Because I have a family member of my ex-wife who, in his early 20s, he held up a gas station, and he is the kindest person you ever want to meet. He served his time, and I respect him tremendously now.
But that's not what I'm asking you. What if the person who did it was in their 50s? were doing, and they weren't desperate. They just wanted extra money, so they defrauded people. And then they gambled the money away. It's a very simple question. I can answer you.
And if they were contrite and they realized, hey, I did something stupid, they were on drugs or who knows what they were, and they were generally a good person and they made a mistake, I think there's forgiveness in the world. I can't answer your question, John. I almost feel like you're trying to lead me down a path to say, well then it's this person and you can't respect this person. Is that where we're headed with this, John?
The guy you said you respected and admired, David Duke, was convicted in 2002 for defrauding his supporters out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. From 1993 to 1999, he's a convicted federal felon. He's a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He pled guilty to these charges. He served 15 months in federal prison. And this is a guy you admire, and you're trying to run for U.S. Congress. You didn't even research the guy.
Hey, John.
You didn't research David Duke, Paul. So do you still admire and respect David Duke? It's a simple question. Do you?
John, I can have respectful ideas for people. Yes, I can have respectful for certain parts of.
You wanted me to call this convicted fraudster felon doctor. Do you still feel he should be respected with the title of doctor after being convicted? He pled guilty. He didn't even contest the charges that he defrauded thousands of his supporters out of donations as low as $5 for 6 years while he was in his early 50s. He knew what he was doing. He made money. And by the way, he was also charged with tax evasion because he wanted extra money to gamble on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and in Las Vegas. This is a guy you respect and admire. Did you ever do homework on David Duke?
Hey, John, there's people who were alcoholic, who did all sorts of terrible things, who couldn't stop themselves. I don't know what his situation was. I don't.
He wasn't an alcoholic. He fled. He had the president's mind to flee to the Ukraine because they knew the government was hot on his tails. For he was a fugitive from justice, got caught, came back when they kicked his door in, and pled guilty. And you respect and admire this guy. Will you right here look in the camera and denounce David Duke?
No, I'm not going to denounce him, but I'm going to research what you just told me. I will research what you just told me. I'm not going to disavow anybody, John. I'm not going to play that game. I'm not playing the disavow game here.
You're okay with a guy who defrauded thousands of his followers? Phony.
I'm going to look into it, John. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to look into it, John. I'm going to look into it.
You're running for Congress. Why didn't you look into it before you started supporting the guy?
Wow, John. Why don't I know everything that there is to know already? It's shocking. Oh, my God, John.
You're running for Congress. I would damn well know who I'm allying with.
Hey, John, I'm not allying with anybody. I've gone on every show I'm invited on, including yours, my friend. And I have answered your questions. I've disagreed with you. I've agreed with you. I mean, I think that is the essence of public office. I'm not getting $10 million from primarily inside the DC Beltway, New York City, Chicago, Houston, LA, but Paul Ryan is. Paul Ryan wants to have open borders. I don't.
And you don't have to sell it. I wish somebody would come along and oust Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan, well, he's retiring anyway, I think. So forget Paul Ryan. But here's the thing, Paul. If you were ever elected to Congress, you've got to put up your hand, take a very similar oath that I took in law enforcement, and pledge to protect, present, and preserve.
That's right.
The Constitution and the laws of the U.S. But you were trying to force me to call a convicted federal felon who scammed thousands of people doctor. You wanted me to respect this guy. I spit on this guy.
Okay.
He's a racist, white supremacist, fraudster felon, and this is a guy you respect.
I looked into the KKK thing, and he was in the KKK in his 20s. And he got out when it started getting violent. And so he, in his young age, he made some mistakes. So
he was a convicted felon in his 50s. So again, your statement is factually inaccurate. He made mistakes from his 20s to his late 50s. That's not mistakes. That's a lifetime of abhorrent behavior. And you're making excuses for the guy.
I'm not making excuses for anybody, John.
You just did.
I'm not making excuses for anybody. I told you I'm going to look into it.
You said he made mistakes as a young man. I'm telling you.
He did make a mistake as a young man.
He pled guilty to federal fraud in his 50s.
You're conflating two issues. John. You're conflating two issues. I was talking about one issue, and you're talking about another.
Of deviant behavior on the part of David Duke. I'm looking at tweets from a week ago denying the Holocaust. You're trying to pigeonhole it to a little period in his 20s.
Well, John, just like you said, I don't see all tweets that are out there. I don't.
Well,
I don't see all tweets that are out there, John.
Google search of David Duke. It comes right up.
Hey, guess what, John? I don't spend time thinking about all sorts of things like that all the time. Okay. And you have yet to answer my question. I've answered so many of your questions. I want you to answer mine, John. Why is it when you and I agree on 95% of things that would be deemed as MAGA, but because we disagree on this thing about Jews or Israel, you want to disavow me? That I don't understand. How do you take the position of you're the MAGA guy and I'm not, because you're saying I don't comport with you and your boss who has fired a bunch of people from Rebel Media, right? It's like a clown car show over there, getting rid of good people.
Wait a second, you're calling Sebastian Gorka, who just joined us, a clown car?
He just joined. No, I said the people who were fired. Go back to the question I asked. 95 and 5, John.
Paul,
Will you answer the question?
but here's the answer. The Rebel has never asked me to produce any type of content. Never. When the people did wrong, they were fired, and I think they did wrong. You just called people like Sebastian Gorka part of a clown car.
No, I did not. No, John, you are putting words in my mouth. I didn't say anything negative about Sebastian Gorka. I think he's done wonderful work. I'm saying the people who were fired. Was Sebastian Gorka fired? Was Sebastian Gorka fired?
Sebastian Gorka left the White House on his own, Paul. No,
was he fired from Rebel Media?
Rebel yesterday, Paul. Stop. Let me answer your question.
So the answer is no, and I was talking about people who are fired.
Well, sound that way, Paul. Sounds like another deflection. The reason I don't support you, the reason I disavow you, is nothing about your positions, put America first, or make America great again. They're racist, they're reprehensible, they're ignorant, they're short-sighted, and you support a guy that for his entire life until today, from his early 20s, where he was a Klansman, to his 50s, where he was convicted on federal fraud charges of hundreds or thousands of his supporters, to a week ago where he denied the Holocaust. This is a man you admit, you respect, admire, and call doctor. So, Paul, yeah, I disavow you because I think you're anything but America first, and I think your positions do anything but make America great again. We ran out of time. I'll give you the last word, 15 seconds.
Great. Go to electnehlen.com. Thanks for your time, John. God bless.